Hello, everybody. Good morning and welcome back to the latest edition of the Morning Bulletin here on the Blood Red channel. I'm your host, Edward Kay. Joining me this morning is Ben Bocsak. We're a couple of minutes late due to some technical difficulties, but I'm sure you all don't mind. We're going to start today by discussing Ryan Gravenberch skipping out on international duty, much to the chagrin of Ronald Koeman. We'll get into why that one is a bit ironic, I'm sure, a little bit later. But just in terms of Gravenberch and endearing himself to Liverpool fans and Jurgen Klopp. I was certainly pretty pleased when I found out that he was skipping out on international duty to try and bed in at Liverpool, get some training in at the AXA Training Centre. And how pleased do you think Jurgen Klopp would be with it, Ben?
I think very pleased. He'll want to get to work with his new player, and I think that kind of shows a really positive attitude in terms of wanting to do well at Liverpool and wanting to set in, wanting to bed committed is pressing. There's been a lot of talk about Gravenberch's attitude. Is it right? Is it this? I don't think Liverpool can have any complaints at all.
Yeah, obviously, Cody Gakpo, Virgil van Dijk is Dutch teammates in the side. Virgil van Dijk, obviously, probably in a bit of a funny position here, really, being the skipper of the Dutch side. Obviously, Koeman will be somebody that he's fairly close with, and sort of got up this morning, saw the news, and thought, sort of penny for your thoughts on what do you think Gakpo and Van Dijk might be thinking about it?
Well, I think Koeman made it clear what he thinks about it, and some of the rest of the Dutch staff as well. It's the national team. It should be a place of pride. It should be somewhere where a player. I think context is. I believe Moldova and North Macedonia, so you don't really need Gravenberch there in those games. It's a couple of games that he can afford to miss, and it won't be national team as well. So, given the context, given that he's just arrived at a new club and he wants to settle in, it's in the interest of the Dutch team as well, really, for him to settle in and to be able to get going at Liverpool straight away, because this is one of the biggest talents in the Netherlands at the moment. So you want him to settle in, and you want him to do well for his club. So I don't really see the whole outrage. I can understand it a little bit, but I think given the context, it's a bit blown out of proportions. Clearly, there's not enough media stuff going on in the Netherlands to focus on, and it seems like it was in the news everywhere. Everyone was commenting on it, even Marco van Basten, which is a bit of a strange one, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it all has been blown out of proportion. As you say, there's nothing to talk about in our world when there is an international break, is there? So people just grasping onto any news. But yeah, it's a bit. I can't really see where Koeman's coming from with it, to be honest. Obviously, I mentioned it's ironic. This is the guy who ditched the Dutch side and went back to Barcelona as soon as they came calling for management. So I'm not really sure he's got a leg to stand on with this one. And obviously, he's still only 21, so I think he's got to be too young for any lasting ramifications in the national team as a result of this, surely, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think right now the Dutch national team is not in the greatest of shapes anyway, especially in the midfield department. So I think if he starts doing well at Liverpool and if he starts performing, then they won't have any choice but to call him up. So yeah, there were some sort of strong words that were being said, but I think ultimately it won't affect his international career. And if it does, for Liverpool, we're not going to be complaining if he doesn't go to the Euros, or if he doesn't go away for 2 weeks every now and again during the international break. And obviously, the Dutch have to qualify for the Euros as well, which isn't looking that likely at the moment. They got some big games coming up, so yeah, we'll see what happens, but I don't think it will be detrimental for Liverpool either way.
Yeah, I think the fewer players we've got away from the club in any given international break, the better for everyone at Liverpool. But I mean, as we said, it's a good way of endearing yourself to the fans, endearing yourself to Jurgen Klopp. It's a good sign that he's trying to get settled in as soon as possible, get used to training. And do you think it maybe? I highly doubt he'd be in position for a starting place against Wolves, but do you think it improves the chances that we might see him off the bench, maybe, or see him in some capacity against Wolves when Liverpool do return?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you look at some of the players who will be playing in South America on Tuesday night, so potentially they might only be back for training on Thursday, given how it's a lot of travel for them to do after they finish their game. I think it's a possibility that Gravenberch is involved. Some of the other players as well, the likes of Soboslai, the Dutch national team, they'll be finishing their international camps on the Sunday. So obviously that makes things a bit more difficult for Gravenberch to be involved, because you'd think if Soboslai is back in the Liverpool team on Monday, he'll probably start. Curtis Jones, I think he's not in the England under-21 squad, if I'm correct, so he'll be with Liverpool training the whole week. You'd think he'd probably start alongside Soboslai. I think Endo finishes his training camp on Tuesday afternoon, so he could be back by Wednesday as well. Potentially he could feature. But the fact that Gravenberch is going to be there and training with Jurgen Klopp for the next 2 weeks, I think does give him an advantage, and it is a possibility that he might feature, although I don't really see him being that number 6 that everyone has been talking about. So I think he'll be competing with Curtis Jones and Soboslai, potentially McAllister if he does eventually play as a number 8. We've seen him as a number 6 mostly, but because Soboslai is back so early and Curtis Jones, I think, stays with Liverpool as well, I don't quite see him starting just yet, but he certainly has a good chance of being involved.
Yeah, as you say, a good chance of being involved. And another player missing international duty, sadly, this time through injury. Obviously, Trent Alexander-Arnold. We got the timeline through yesterday after his scan on the hamstring injury that he suffered against Aston Villa. It's looking like he might be out for about 2 weeks. I mean, if he is to miss that Wolves game, which looks fairly likely if he is out for the 2 weeks, Ben, I mean, what would you expect to see from Liverpool? Do you think they'd have to completely switch the system? I mean, without Trent, I'm not really seeing how they could play this system with the inverted fullback, Trent going into midfield without him, especially with, Connor Bradley, who deputised so well from him in pre-season. He's obviously out for between, I think, 8 and 10 weeks with a stress fracture in his back. Joe Gomez obviously can play right back, but I don't think anybody thinks he could play that role where he comes into midfield. And obviously putting such a good showing at centre-back might be needed again with Van Dijk potentially suffering an extra bit of suspension for swearing at the ref. But yeah, do you think the system and the formation might be completely changed without Trent against Wolves?
I think it's got to be if he's not involved. I mean, personally, I think Van Dijk will get an extra suspension, so I'm not expecting him to play against Wolves. And obviously that means you either start Joe Gomez at right back and play Jarrell Kwanzaa, or play Gomez in that left-sided centre-back role. But then you have to kind of look at your options and see who could play right back. I think one option that could be interesting is Wataru Endo. He's played as a right back in the past in Japan. That's where he started his career. I don't know if he could play the Trent role, but given the fact that he does play as a number 6 and has played as a right back, that I could see that happening. Obviously, it's unfortunate that this happens to coincide with the international break, because if it didn't, then Jurgen Klopp might have more time with him on the training pitch to have a look at that and see how Endo could look in that position. He won't be granted that opportunity, but it does help that Endo could be back by Wednesday morning, and then you have a couple of days to figure out how you want to line up against Wolves and whether that's the right role for him, whether it's worth putting in Jarrell Kwanzaa and playing Gomez in the right back position instead. Hopefully Liverpool will have a decision regarding Virgil van Dijk as well. I think the sooner we find out about that, the better, because Liverpool want to prepare ahead of time for that Wolves game. And if a decision is not made, if the decision is made even nearer to the time of that match, then I think that's going to have a disruption to Liverpool's plans. So ideally, you'd want to have that figured out and then go forward from there and see who can be used in that role. But I certainly think Endo could be a wild card option there. I think maybe Bajcetic, he's played as a defender in the past. He's played as a right back, so he could be another option. But again, he's coming back from injury, so we don't know whether he will be there yet, whether his match fitness is going to be enough to be involved in that game.
Yeah, well, it'll certainly be interesting to see what Liverpool do and how they line up under Jurgen Klopp at Wolves if there is no Trent Alexander-Arnold. I mean, there were rumours that he was under consideration to play in the middle of the park for England again on international duty. Do you think that would have been helpful at all for Liverpool if he had gone out and gained more experience, or do you think Jurgen Klopp will? I know he won't be happy that he's injured and maybe missing Wolves, but do you think he'll secretly be happy that he's not away with England?
I think I'm not sure who England are playing at the moment, but some of the games that you play in qualifiers, I don't necessarily think are that helpful for someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold's development, who's played in Champions League finals. With all respect to the opposition, it's probably not going to help him much. I think obviously you don't want a player injured, but given the length of the injury, it might even be a little bit ideal for Liverpool that he doesn't go away. He's not involved in training camps and matches where he could get a worse injury potentially. So I think, maybe Jurgen Klopp might be a little bit secretly pleased that he'll keep him around. And the length of the injury, layoff is meant to be 2 weeks, but given how Alexander-Arnold has been in the past, he does tend to recover well from injuries. He's never had long-term injuries, so there's a possibility that he could be back for that Wolves game as well.
Yeah, I think his previous most significant injury was a hamstring that he came back a little bit early from as well. So yeah, hopefully they can rush him back a bit, maybe get him back fit, fighting for Wolves. But it remains to be seen if we have any news about that. We will, of course, bring you it here on the Blood Red channel. But for now, that's all we've got time for on the Morning Bulletin this morning. So thanks for joining me and Ben, and we'll catch you next time.